people, tech, and what's next. Really focusing in on the intersection of how we look after people in such a moment of technological revolution and transformation. And today's guest is someone who's been sitting at the intersection of people and technology for most of her career. So let me go ahead and welcome on to the episode, Elise Stribos. Elise is currently the CPO at Thinkific, which is obviously a leading learning technology platform. And before we get into your more illustrious background of all of it, Elise, maybe just hi, hello, and thanks for joining the program.
Hi, it's great to be here. Very fun.
All right, good. I know you and I have some of the best banter, and so hopefully we can let people in on like what are some of the crazy things that Elise and Grift talk about when their conversations go 20 to 30 minutes over. There are a lot of times. But maybe to get started, Elise, I know, as I kind of mentioned in the intro to the episode, you have a pretty cool background in that it's been pretty people-centric, HR-focused, talent cycle focused, but it's been across a number of industries, new technologies, the fitness and well-being space, and now obviously into maybe the mishmash of learning and technology in the education space with Thinkific. Maybe an initial, I don't know if this is a softball or this is a hardball question, but like, how did you find yourself here doing this type of work? What's led you to this space, this intersection?
Yeah, I would say that I've been incredibly interested in HR, which I see as the intersection of kind of people and business performance for my whole, like as long as I can remember. In fact, like I was at university and I had a very broad career in commerce and science. And then as I learned more about human behavior and that part of the science realm and more about kind of commerce and economics, I found like this natural fit with human resources and sort of pursued that career ever since. I would say I'm incredibly passionate about the capacity and the uniqueness of humans, and I've always believed that like businesses is such a wonderful form where we can show that uniqueness, and allowed me to sort of pursue this belief that it is the differentiating factor for us and our performance and our growth, and business is one way we get to exhibit that. I would say, so through my career, as you mentioned, a number of different industries, lots of emerging technologies, a lot of kind of ups and downs, very much a roller coaster experience in terms of highs and lows as technology offers, and as the world has offered. But I would say on reflection, and why I'm like sort of at Thinkific and feel incredibly at home at Thinkific, is it is this place where learning, growth, human experience come together with technology, and the company has this equal value that has like permeated the business for as long as it exists around that kind of balance between empathy and performance. And so those values resonate incredibly strongly with me, and they're not only lived by like thinkers, which is what we call our Thinkific team, but also by our customers too. And so it's really lovely to have like this sort of culture and values and ethos surrounding what we do every day.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. I'm going to follow up with a question that I'm asking this mostly because I get this question all the time, which is a bit of a meta one, which is like, hey, you as a developing and enabling leadership company, how do you think about doing the same for your people? And so maybe for you all at Thinkific, Elise, when you think about how you all try to make sure you're helping people build careers, build the right skills, be prepared for what's next, what are some of the things you all do to really make sure that happens?
I think first and foremost, like we use our own product. In fact, like part of our onboarding is everyone goes away and builds like a Thinkific course. And so we create that connection really early on around this experience and trying to tie the employee experience to our customer experience and how we use our product. So that's sort of, I guess, that how, or the what we sort of do. In terms of kind of a little bit more of that general ethics and values behind it, we hold a really high bar for curiosity. And so what we learn and what I see with our thinkers and with our customers, we try and share learnings across the group. We deeply want to understand how people can get better learning outcomes, both for our customers and for our employees, and we seek to serve that. So as we integrate the people team of the business, which is it's our number one thing, be totally integrated with thinkers, we can interchange that knowledge and try and test different things. And that's not just using technology, but other ways of learning as well, and what facilitates great outcomes. And I think like there's no magic bullet, you know, I don't think it's a secret that everyone learns in different ways and experiences things in different ways. And so that sort of flexibility, but ability to scale kind of flexibility and whatever our customer or thinker needs becomes more and more important. And I think is going to become more and more important over time. I would say though, naturally as well, like because of who Thinkific is, and learning and growth is a huge part of our culture. People are naturally drawn to it, you know, so people who are interested in growth and interested in learning. And so we end up hiring a lot of people who care a lot about this. And so that also means that like we're not forcing it down anyone's throat. You know, people are incredibly motivated to go and pursue learning and grab opportunities. And so our job, or my job, I see, is like really sort of finding ways to scale that, remove friction, and like where that enablement lives to allow them to have their best learning and growth experience in the business.
Yeah. You said curiosity, and I think that, you know, just from my own vantage, my team hears me drab on about this ad nauseum. Like that to me is the super skill. It always has been. Probably as we get into later parts of our conversation, probably becomes even more human super intelligence, is the ability to be innately curious and kind of marry your intuition with really good listening. This question is maybe a follow-up to that for you all. As you think about, you know, you obviously being the CPO, you're both tasked with building amazing learning experiences, but then also you know, you're kind of where the buck stops for ensuring those learning experiences deliver business outcomes. And I'm curious to get your take. Like when you think of curiosity, I mean, you could tell me as someone who loves this stuff, hey, this is going to drive up our curiosity. I'd be like, absolutely. Where do I sign? But maybe for like, you know, for you, as you think about, you know, working with business leaders, like how do you measure high curiosity and like driving curiosity in the system?
How do you measure and drive it? I think firstly, there has to be an underlying mechanisms in the business that allow people to get access to information very easily. And so the sharing of not only data, but customer stories, information in general, this information flow allows people who are naturally curious to go out and look for dots to connect. And so particularly this year, our team and me have been incredibly focused more on like the communication channels, how they work, the different forums where people can get and receive information that then allows them to go out and like be curious and do better things and innovate and create and all this sort of stuff. We're definitely not perfect, but I can see we're getting better and better, and particularly learning more about like these forums that inspire curiosity in better ways. A good example, like last week we're a remote first company, but we had an on-site, and this is great. It's company-wide on-site, so much fun. Everyone gets together. You finally work out how tall everybody is and everything else that goes along with being in person, which is cool. Yeah. But what also that forum does is, because it is fairly unique, it's a once-a-year thing. People come with so much energy and curiosity, not only for each other, but what they're doing, that forum, we see a huge amount of value, and then driving not only kind of curiosity about each other's work, but understanding of people's work and those business outcomes. When curiosity turns into understanding, that turns into then cross-functional projects that have been executed well, or speed or quality or innovation, that's when you turn curiosity into results. And I didn't really answer like how do we measure those things, but definitely more and more we're looking at those correlations. Where do we see good results in the business, and where are we seeing different business and cultural and people factors that may be correlated with that, and then kind of measure it across things.
Yeah, I love that. So you've worked in, I'm not gonna get all the industries that you've worked in.
No,
you've worked in sustainable energy, electric vehicles, fitness and performance, learning technology, e-commerce. I'm sure a number of other ones when you were back in your professional services and consulting world. I missed a lot, didn't I?
You got the main ones, particularly in people officer in the US, and they've covered a number of different countries. So that's great stuff.
Yeah. So I mean, what's interesting is a lot of those, there's some similar flavor to those different industries, but a lot of those are, you know, on the forefront, trying to be innovative, trying to push net new things forward. Across all of those experiences, like I think about, the idea of like a people first culture and like people driving performance. Are there in all of those different lanes that you've been able to run in, are there common threads that you would say, like regardless of industry, regardless of size of company, like these couple of things like have to be there or are there in a people first type of culture?
Really good question. In a people first culture, what has to be there? I think, and this is an increasing thing, trust and transparency is the number one thing. If people trust the company as like an entity, their leadership team and each other, and they also know that they are being given incredibly transparent information, even if it's not complete information, that allows a much faster, more cohesive, positive momentum in the business. And that has been common across all the industries I've worked in. And I would say it shows up in different ways. And so I'll give an example. You say EVs, right? So we had one goal in that company. The goal was to get the car on the road, right? That's very, very, very specific. And so in that way, the trust and transparency was nearly like project management transparency and trust. Like, I will do my bit. This bit will be done by this date, because building a car, it is like a giant, complicated project. You have to do this by this date, this by the date, and then it gets this car on the road. It's very, very structured. And so trust and transparency coming from that team accountability on very specific things, like in that moment, I think leveraged a great speed and connection and collaboration that created an incredibly positive energy. I would say that's different in other industries that are a little bit more complicated. Trust and transparency in the fitness and wellness industry I was in, it was a franchise business model. And so there's like a lot of different forums, because your customers are also, they're not your employees, but they wear the brand, they have the hat. And so that trust feature and transparency not only needs to happen with your employees, but also needs to happen directly with your franchise owners, and the transparency, so then they can share that out with their customers as well. Because they're sort of like an extra middleman, is the way I thought about it from people culture. So it is, I'm laboring the point, but I would say if you can understand how trust and transparency can be optimized for your business and the ways that your business work and interact and connect with each other, then that is just like the foundation of growth and creating like a highly energetic people first culture.
It's, it's so simple and to hear it that way, but I think what you're also calling out is like making sure there's so much redundancy of that trust, and it's like at every single corner it's there, and it ties back to the overarching ambitious things you're trying to do as a company, regardless of the size or industry that you're in.
Yeah. And I will say, like, it does, I talked about it mainly from a company perspective, but it's an individual perspective. If you losing trust compounds in a really negative way. So if you do one thing that you walk past, or you like a person doesn't act in the right way, if you like let these micro moments pass and then they accumulate, they have an outsized impact in a negative way on the way the business can perform.
Yeah.
So every moment matters is what I'll say.
Yeah. Speaking of every moment matters, this is a pretty interesting moment we find ourselves in work. I'm curious to get your take on sort of the role of the CPO amidst the evolving work landscape. So obviously, wouldn't be a podcast if we didn't mention AI at least 90 times. But all the things that are coming with that, the efficiency, the optimization, the rethinking workflows, like all of it's so exciting. And yet, having been at a couple of conferences over the past couple of months, what I have been noticing is like a lingering stench of fear. It's maybe like a really derogatory way to describe it, but like it just seems like everyone is very antsy and anxious. And I think a lot of that anxiety, you tell me, but it feels like it's bubbling up through the people office. And there's a lot of eyes on like CPO, and therefore all the folks inside the office of the CPO to sort of have the answer for like, what are we going to do about this? Not only leveraging the technology to its full extent, but ensure we're not leaving people behind. But then also, how do we optimize our workforce for the use of it? while also in trying to stay true to the culture and the ethos that makes us who we are? Like, that's a really big question, but how do you how do you see the role of the CPO in all of that?
The role of the CPO. Okay, so firstly, I think it is so natural to feel anxious and that things are going fast paced. You're not keeping up and you're not sure. No one is sure. Literally, no one is sure about anything. Like, honestly, I was just telling Grift earlier and some of my teams, like, we have $2 trillion IPOs. Like, that number wasn't even heard of in movies 10 years ago. Like, this week, we have an executive who's getting performance awards tied to populating Mars. So, like, this anxiety and, like, am I relevant? Like, you can't beat it. You can't. And so I think then, how do you ground yourself in what you can control and what you do feel strong in, and get people more comfortable with that is certainly a role I see the CPO playing. And so there are so many mechanisms with doing that. Again, come back to like the trust and transparency. How do we ground ourselves in our values, what we believe in, what we know is true, and how do we communicate that? And I think that creates a feeling of at least sort of safety that then you can work towards. Then the other things, what else do you do? I think you have to come back, and as an HR person, you have to have your own vision for how you want AI to show up in your business and be really clear about that. And I think don't let time, if you are in that role or you are even in any leadership role that has that sort of influence, don't wait to be told about having an opinion. Have one now, because things will start to happen around you, and then it will be very much harder to rein back in. And that's how I feel, right? Like, if I don't set a standard around what I believe in and what I think should be true, it'll just happen. And then you'll be like, oh God, how do I get control of this? This has fallen outside of my values or what I think is important, et cetera, et cetera. And may contribute to the race to the bottom. So for me in particular, I look, and my team, we're really starting looking at the function of HR in our business in a really sort of granular way, with the whole thesis of what's like, protect what's human, protect the things that are unique, that are differentiating our human experience, our relationships, our collaboration, our innovation and creativity. And the beautiful thing about new technologies are they allow for more time to be spent on those things, or more capacity to be spent on those things. And that can be that's not just AI, that's tons of technology. It was the internet, it was like lots of things, And so I think if we think about that and really take a positive spin on how we protect that time as much as possible, and we're very clear about that, then AI becomes a tool, a really helpful tool that will allow us to leverage human potential in a really, really great way. And so we are looking at the employee journey really closely. This is how we're looking at it. And we say, okay, what is the framework we're going to use to decide how this shows up? And we're using a framework, which some people may have heard of, called automate, augment, or protect. What do we automate, right? Like, what is scrutinizing the employee journey? What can we automate and what should we automate? What do we augment, right? Like, what do we have that then we can use AI to enhance our time or our capacity or our knowledge and understanding, whatever, but we still have that very much human control? And what do we protect and not let anything touch? And for us, that's things like candidate experience, any people decisions, but we're getting super granular about it because I want to feel like we know, and then we can always loosen it up. We can always be like, actually, maybe that could be looser. But if we don't get very strict about this framework right now, it will be done to us, and then we lose our ability to protect the things what matters.
Yeah, it feels to me like most folks are a little bit afraid to put any of those guardrails, or you might call them like inhibitors, in place, because I think they're worried that maybe the feeling or the way that might be received is like it's stifling innovation. But I think it's interesting to think about, like, well, it's maybe easier to like let things continue to expand versus let Pandora's box totally be opened. And yeah. How about, I think that same type of lens is interesting to think about, not just on the organizational or the functional level, but also on the individual level. And something I spend some of my time, probably too much of my time, thinking about is sort of the here and now, and then the then, or then the future. And I'd love to get your perspective, Elise, on how you're thinking about like how do we help people become even better at what they do today, and also ensure that they both can continue to build critical skill capability, continue to be better and better at their craft, while also maybe not falling prey to the, I think it's called the apprentice paradox or something along those lines right now, where it's like junior people are not necessarily always wanting to do the work because they can get something better from a tool, and senior leaders aren't always going to junior people anymore because they can get something faster from a tool. So you find these forces that are actually pushing the apprentice model into oblivion right now. Yeah. All that pretext is sort of the question for you is a simple one, which is like, how do you balance continuing to ensure people do lean into those human oriented moments that they need to, and also do lean into the technology so that they don't get left in the dust for the type of capabilities they're going to need in the future?
Yeah. Okay. So I think there's a number of ways to do it. I think the people team does have the capacity to influence this. And firstly, like if the people team has their own beliefs and people share these beliefs, for us, for example, very much protecting this human component and people can buy into that, then it's allowing those, like through PBPs, through hiring, those conversations to sort of happen in those moments that matter for our employees. There's one. I think for managers as well, it's to get managers to also understand and feel confident in taking ownership of that. You know, my job is to free up time or free up admin or take away things that are getting in the way of my team being collaborative, innovative, creative, etc. So you're enabling them by removing friction, taking up time. Then the other thing, to your point, is how do you make sure they are like doubling down? Well, firstly, we've hired very curious, very intelligent people who want to do these things. Like they want to grow, they have a growth mindset, they want to grow their careers, they want to grow their craft. And so there's that. But it can also, I think, be supported even in the way you just understand jobs. So to your point around the apprentice piece, if those people didn't think of themselves as apprentices, you know, and I can like automate this and do that, but instead we're thinking about themselves as a level up. Like if you look at a traditional job architecture, it's really interesting because the job architecture as you go up levels becomes more and more about strategy, creativity, innovation, influence, and the bottom levels is more of the admin stuff. And so to your point, are we getting rid of those? No, but can we rethink our job architecture and structure when it's like an admin role isn't this anymore? It's this above, and your capacity for doing more strategic, innovative work is expected earlier on. And that's great. Like people come out of university so smart, so hungry, so motivated, so connected. And I don't know what other people felt, but I often see people really growth mindseted, new ideas, and they were nearly like pushed into roles where they couldn't even leverage this momentum and excitement and new learnings that they'd received out of university. And today I think we can do that because we can say, you know what, you don't have to do your time. I used to do a vacancy report where I counted every single vacant person in the business. It was 40,000 person business, first job. That would not have to happen today, you know, and I could have spent my energy and time building relationships with the customer group, learning how to be a PPP, all these things to sort of accelerate that really strategic craft of my own, which if consolidated or compounded across businesses means businesses are going to be smarter. They're going to solve problems better, faster. They're going to be more innovative and creative because people will be flexing this muscle much earlier.
That sounds pretty exciting. That's a really good, optimistic way of I think we're looking at the challenge ahead of us. Maybe along those lines, for folks who you see are just kind of coming fresh out of their educational backgrounds and joining the workforce, like that to me does seem to be maybe the most anxious. I mean, I know they wrote a book called The Anxious Generation about millennials, but maybe they're going to have to write a sequel sometime soon. What are you seeing with that group? And you were kind of mentioning a little bit of that hunger. Are you still seeing that same level of like tenacity for wanting to dive in? And this is more just generally speaking. And what are you all thinking about doing that allows folks to really kind of take the reins and lean into the moment versus wait for direction?
Look, I would say I wish I had a broader sense. Like we don't have a huge internship program or any of that where I can tell you like theoretically, but I would say anecdotally, I definitely see this hunger and excitement and urgency and people want to grow their careers. And I think it's driven we can get all existential about this, but I think that's driven by like people want to grow and they still they don't want to just like fall back on what's easiest. Like another example would be like use of screens and smartphones. People are actively trying to get rid of them. They're not falling prey to what this is and they're trying to like find parts around it. I would say secondarily, like the fact is like cost of living is going up. The expectation on people to drive successful careers, I think, is probably increasing. I definitely see that where people feel like they're going to have their careers longer and they need it as well as sort of want it. So yes, I would say that is there. How are we thinking about harnessing it? It's like a great topic and one we're actively exploring. I think everyone is probably exploring this, but I just kind of keep coming back to this idea around, instead of waiting for jobs to be changed by AI, how do we proactively change the structures and I guess feelings towards these jobs now ahead of time so that we are making it work for us? And then even if you're crafting roles to be like, okay, we're not there yet, but I assume that all this work will be done by AI. That is exciting, and that will allow people to start to flex those muscles and be very, very valuable to the business. But I can't speak for the whole world. Like I don't know. I know that this is a problem. I know it's a growing problem. So all I can talk about is like I definitely am committed to it not being a problem at Thinkific, and instead thinking about how we again reinvest the time or the roles or like these people resources to then add value to the business rather than just make it more efficient.
Yeah, I feel like efficiency and speed seem to be the things that have risen to the forefront of business outcomes that are driven by the sort of the technological revolution we find ourselves in. I mean, obviously those two things are really big, but are you thinking at all about, and maybe the better question is, how are you thinking about the role of technology? Let's think of like a place like learning, helping people learn new things. Like how does this technology help improve outcomes of learning, not just make learning more accessible? And I guess that could be an outcome in itself, but not just make the learning production process faster or need less resource. Like how are you thinking about this technology making learning better?
Huge question. I would say
those are the only kind I have, you know that.
How are we thinking about making learning outcomes better using technology? I would say, firstly, I don't want to underestimate that like speed and efficiency is still incredibly valued, particularly if it's harnessed in the right way. Like if you can get features in front of customers sooner, earlier, so that they can then focus more on new content development and growth. Like if I think about our customers and they're like teaching something, right? If they have a technology that allows them to get all their content out faster and to more people and all these things, then they can focus on new content and innovating content and creating new things. And so there's like really wonderful things attached to like speed and efficiency with learning. But I would say in terms of outcomes-based learning, I still just can't go past the fact that AI does allow us access to different things, and it does allow us to scale things that we previously couldn't scale. For example, like I now can get deep amounts of research done for me while I'm doing something else, like research papers that would take me ages and ages. So this access to research allows me to interpret it and read it and like absorb way more than I normally would. That allows me to be more effective in my role, more effective in any part of my life, So I think there's that there. There is also we are able to harness technology to better understand different learning techniques and styles and adapt to those much faster. And so if we can continue to use technology to allow people to get the best learning outcomes in a way that they best learn and they best absorb information and they best need it for their roles, then I think we've done a good job. But I don't have like a silver bullet of exactly how, but I do believe that the technologies exist now to do it, and people are thinking about that and are able to understand that there is like really positive connection there.
Yeah. Maybe putting this on the scale of you, Elise, I'm curious, when you think about that mixture of being able to utilize and lean into this technology in ways that allow you to be more effective. But maybe I'd love to get your perspective on like, what do you hope in your role stays like human?
all the things that I like think are valuable. So we spoke about, I've spoken with my team a lot about like our culture. We're spending a lot of time on EQ behaviors, like not the what, not the goals, and not the overall values, but the how. How are we doing things? How are we leveraging? How are we turning strategy or goals into results in a very beautiful, consolidated way with outsized impact? And I think this focused on behaviors and emotional intelligence and those softer skills is something that is growing enormously. I think honestly, HR is having their moment. Like this is a true moment in time for any HR professional to show their value. Never before have we owned a part of the organization that is so important to get those results, because behaviors are attached to the people, the way they interact, the way they work together, all those things is the how. And that when strategy or technology or everything else can be replicated, that is going to turn good to great. You know, that turns from playing to winning. And so as a CPO and a people team, that is so cool to have the opportunity now to leverage that and show that and get results from that versus we just built the technology earlier or different. Like that's going to be more and more democratized. That wasn't that concise.
No, I love the insights, and it leads me to another question, which is thinking about that and the compounding interest of that effect over time. Like if you were to, I dare I say, think out 3 years into the future, because I know everyone says don't think past 12 months right now. But if you were to look out into that future that's maybe a little bit further off, and you were to maybe just try to name a couple of elements that you think are going to dictate thriving organizations from those that aren't, what comes to mind?
People spending more and more time on the distinctly human things: creativity, judgment, connection, innovation, brainstorming, all these things. I think that is something I want to observe, and I think will be part of truly successful organization. I would say up-leveled roles, really like more complicated, more strategic, more ones that are more focused on EQ and skills and growth, rather than just what you're doing. I would like for AI just to be like an unspoken about tool that has just absorbed all the admin, all the drudgery, I would say, but it's like taking over our lives. You know, it's a natural part of doing business, and it's taken away that friction without us worrying about this frictional source. I think it's a world where leaders are all coaches and people are able to ask the right questions rather than give the right answers when knowledge becomes more and more democratized. And I think that goes outside of work, by the way. I hope to be that as a parent. I hope my kids experience that at school, this like critical thinking, this judgment, this like getting people to think better through questioning versus answering. And I would say then, as we think more about like judgment and democratization of things, how do we like these companies that truly do live their values around trust and transparency and kind of come back to this, like, this is a known place that operates in the way we say we will, everything, like we tell you what's real and what's not real, and are able to do that, I think is really, really great. So these are a number of things which also circle around the same theme.
Yeah. Well, I feel like this,
you know, people can move around organizations as they learn different skills and different jobs really quickly. They can move a lot further through different career choices and different jobs rather than feeling stuck on like, what's the next manager level above me?
Yeah. I think that, you know, both the lens of the potential amazing impact to internal mobility, but also to your point, like the transferability potentially to new industries or new functions or new companies is a really potentially interesting upside of all this stuff. To me, a lot of the things you shared, maybe not so surprisingly, that one of the centralized themes across those was going back to our initial conversation around curiosity. And maybe I'm curious to get a little bit of a peek into your brain. Like, what are you being really curious about? What are you trying to learn right now about all this that helps you feel like you are moving forward in a time where it feels like it's hard to keep up with the pace?
Yeah. I would say where I'm thinking a lot about is the balance between freedom and guardrails and what I use and what I don't use. Like even just in my own internal day, right? Like how am I being curious enough to then understand, curious enough about like what is out there and what's happening, to then be able to translate that to value and impact. Because you can be curious about tons of things right now, right? Anything. But at work, I need that to turn into impact, like something that's going to help the organization. And so how do I try and stay focused, get the right amount of learning without going down too many rabbit holes, that then allows me to get to, I guess, layer that on top of what Thinkific needs, their strategy, their goals and results, and say, okay, now I can leverage that for impact. And so there's still like a lot of exploration, a lot of curiosity, a lot of trial and error as everybody is going through. But I do think the business, I start to feel like I'm getting that overlay a little bit better, and we'll continue to try and work on that.
So a lot of people, as we talked about, I don't want to speak for everyone in the world. Maybe I'm going to. Not even just the world, intergalactically, now that we're trying to put people on Mars. I would venture to guess a lot of folks would resonate with that feeling of feeling behind, like feeling behind on the technological upskilling of themselves, feeling behind on the expectations, feeling behind on, feeling behind the invisible unicorn that exists, who somehow has figured this all out, but we know probably doesn't exist right now. Do you have any advice for folks as they're feeling that? How do you personally navigate which I'm sure, I speak for myself. I have those feelings almost on a daily right now. How are you navigating those yourself?
Yeah, I would say firstly, recognize that it is so healthy and normal to feel like that right now. I've not spoken to one person that feels incredibly confident at the forefront of what's going to happen in technology and AI, or even frankly in the world right now. And so, and being humble enough to be like, I don't have all the answers, I think is a really good, healthy place to be. And so then I would say, come back to like your strengths, like Gallup did this strengths-based leadership, and I'm like such a firm believer in this ethos. What are you strong at with your own behaviors and skills, and lean more into that? So think about and use your judgment, your capacity for innovation, create critical thinking, relationships, like lean on these. These are strengths, and these are going to be differentiators in the future. And everybody out there knows these things in their own way, and they're strong in different ways. And so thinking about leading with EQ right now more than ever, I think is such a wonderful opportunity and a differentiating opportunity, without, of course, letting go of like also leading with technology. And so I'll say, in terms of speed, for example, we did one thing at Thinkific recently, which I think worked really well. We just said the whole business has 5 hours this week, and here's a training course, and go on with Claude and co-work. And so then at least there's like a feeling of momentum and support, not like forgetting about it, and still like bringing it to the forefront and enabling people with the tools and momentum without stifling it with them. And so there's that. But then as a leader, I like make this request to everybody: use this moment in time rather than to worry about keeping up all the time. To yes, like keep your team current and learn the things, but lean equally into emotional intelligence and these beautiful like parts of human nature, experience, performance, and growth that we now have an opportunity to leverage even further, because all the drudgery can be taken away.
I think that's a pretty good ending point for our conversation. No, Elise, I really appreciate you coming on. You and I get a chance to talk pretty frequently, but even in this conversation we've had, I feel like I continue to have a really, really strong appreciation for your ability to marry what people might consider soft, squishy things like empathy and emotional intelligence, but make them sound very business necessary.
They are business necessary.
But I honestly think it's one of your superpowers, is to show, the types of investments that I know you all at Thinkific, and I know you've championed over the course of your career. Like you know how to really show people the actual business outcome or business impact they're going to drive. And I get to learn from you every time we get a chance to chat. So I appreciate you coming on, sharing some of your wisdom and some of your aspirations with the group. And maybe you've talked about Mars a few times, so maybe you have aspirations to become the first intergalactic CPO. I don't know. That'd be good for the LinkedIn page. But again, thanks so much for coming on. It was a blast chatting with you.
No, I appreciate it, Grift. Always such a pleasure. Thank you. And thanks. Like, love working with the Thoughtium team, man. So this is yet another chance to do that.
Of course. Well, hope you have a good rest of your week, and we'll hopefully get you back on here again soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Grift.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Elise. All right. And that will do it for our episode today, episode 299, People, Tech, and What's Next. Man, a really, really rich conversation. A lot of different layers. I think I'm leaving this one feeling a little more optimistic and a little bit more in control over some of the chaos that's happening in the world right now. But you can catch this episode and all other episodes on our Navigating Now repository, thoughtium.com//live. You can also catch all these episodes on our YouTube channel. Just search Thoughtium and all of these will come up. Join us again next week for another live episode of Navigating Now, episode 280. Stay tuned for the details. We appreciate you for following along our journey, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone.